For this episode of Let's Talk Jinx, we're going to talk about patch 12.23. Every time a patch comes out, we talk about it, as well as form something of an AD carry tier list in the comment section down below, as decided by you guys. So with that being said, there are no direct changes to Jinx in this patch, but there are changes to other champions that might affect Jinx's laning phase, so we'll start with some of those. There's also some big ARAM changes if you're an ARAM player. You know, if you play Jinx, there's a chance you play casually because she's considered like a for fun champion sometimes. And so there's some changes in there you might want to look into. But for the champion changes themselves, if we scroll all the way down here and we go to, say, Tahm Kench, because he's a support champion, so you might be playing with this champion, or you might be playing against this champion in the laning phase. The passive AP damage has actually been added. The Q AP ratio has been increased, and the self heal has been increased. The W AP ratio increased, E gray health increased, R AP scaling increased, shield decay adjusted. Basically, they were kind of buffing AP Tahm Kench. Now, while I don't think this will actually be something you see in the bottom lane, most likely you'll still be saying like tanky support Tahm Kench. At the same time, the thing that's interesting about this is if you do see this, it's going to be doing like a lot more damage, but should be more squishy. So like in hindsight, like when we see a Tahm Kench on the enemy team in the support role, we think of him the same, concept as like Braum, Leona, Thresh even, things like that, where it's like if we're trading with him, it's not going to be as much as a squishier champion, and he probably has engage, we got to watch out because we're Jinx, we're mobile, things like that. Same if you're playing with the Tahm Kench even, where it's like, okay, when he goes in with the W, knocks people up, throw the flame chompers on top of them, kind of like lock people up, have the combo. If people are playing AP, Tahm Kench, if this ends up kind of being runaway the best way to play him, even in the support role, he's going to be doing a lot of damage, especially on the Q, which is a tongue lash. So you want to be dodging that by using the minion wave. That doesn't go through minions. Some abilities certain champions have, of course, can go through the minion wave and still hit you. This is not one of them. So if you're playing against this champion as Jinx, take note that you can use the minion wave to block this ability, where it looks like a lot of the AP ratio damage is probably going to be coming from. But if you're playing with this champion, what's going to be interesting is it's kind of like playing with a mage support suddenly, like a Brand or Veigar, even Xerath. That's an era a little bit of long ago, but it was only 2017, about 5 years, half a decade. That was a thing going into that season and going into the preseason where you had supports doing a bunch of damage and then you just had to follow up. And the nice thing about Jinx in those scenarios, at least, is that sure, let the mage support do like 80% of their health, and post level 6 just let your super mega death rocket take care of the rest, and they're just setting up kills for you at that point for you to still get fed. So seeing how this plays out, this is only a personal opinion, not expert opinion. I don't think this is going to weed out his tank build in the support role specifically. What you might see is this maybe even mid lane, but like in the jungle or something. So keep that in mind. Trundle's not really a support, but Yuumi is. Now, passive cooldown is being increased, and the R root duration is being decreased. Basically, and there's been a post, there's like a Yuumi kind of like rework coming in. They're not really changing the whole like attached to a player thing. They kind of explained it as, we want that because we want new players. If you have a friend you're trying to get into the game, their whole job is just to stick to you and worry about like spell casting and stuff if they're new to MOBAs. And I can understand that. I think one of the problems we also see is in pro play, if you've watched pro play Yuumi, like you watch Worlds, for example, when Yuumi ever got through, to be fair, those Yuumis were bouncing off of champions all the time. They weren't just stuck. Like, I know the running joke is just to AFK on somebody, go eat dinner or whatever while you're playing Yuumi. But like in pro play, that doesn't happen. In pro play, they actually are using the passive, jumping off of champions, doing stuff, jumping between different champions, and actually playing the champion in a lot more entertaining of a way than the memes of solo queue. But in solo queue, that doesn't happen, and that is a problem. But they're not going to fix it by trying to make Yuumi be off of people more often. Just make her power like attached to people be different. It's a whole like separate video, but if you're playing as Jinx with a Yuumi, because they both have Heartseeker skins, that's where I'm going with this. The thing about that will be interesting to see is here is just the passive cooldown is being increased and the root duration is being decreased, right? So it's like, hey, if they want to stay attached to you the whole time, some of the stuff they do is going to be harder to do and take longer to do. But it also means if you're playing against Yuumi and you let her through pick bans, the root duration, for example, is going to be a little less, instead of, it has the numbers down here, instead of almost 2 full seconds, it's going to be only 1 second and then a quarter after that. So about a whole half second taken off for the final chapter if you do get rooted. And the cooldown is going up from 14 to 6 to 18 to 6 seconds. So it's a whole extra 4 seconds for you to do stuff with. Again, we can't read into these too much because the rework will come and then we'll see how things change even more. But for this patch, at least, that's how that's going to work if you're playing with a Yuumi or you're playing against a Yuumi as Jinx. Zeri all abilities are being adjusted. They just, okay, this is a paragraph and a half, but basically move speed's being adjusted. Attack damage is going up by 3, so Zeri's last hitting against you, if you're playing against Zeri as Jinx, that might be a little bit up. Trading damage is going to be a little bit up because she's going to have 3 extra damage per hit. The base armor is going up, so she's going to be taking a little less damage from your auto attacks when you're trading back. So you're going to be doing, like, if you were in a fist fight with Zeri as Jinx, their punches are doing more to you suddenly than you're doing to them suddenly. That's how that's working. The power adjustment there in trades is going in Zeri's favor a bit. The base health is even going up. The attack speed ratio is going up by quite a bit. And the HP growth per level is going up. So even the damage you're doing is getting negated as soon as it hit the next level. All right. I'm not saying these are massive buffs. I'm just saying, like, in terms of trading as Jinx against this champion, Zeri is going to feel a bit more beefier, tankier, bulkier, toned, whatever, you know, analogy you want to use. So keep that in mind. If you're playing with an aggressive support that has Ignite, though, that's going to mitigate some of this as well. And then there you go. But if you're not, and you're kind of playing for like a passive scaling, you might just want to scale then. Because Zeri wants to scale ultimately anyway. So if you're not fighting, that still works for you in your favor because you get to scale into the late game and get your items. And then when you crit later on, that like 4 base armor and the 3 attack damage and the move, it's not going to matter when you get crit for like 2,000 damage and 2 auto attacks. You know what I'm saying? All right, so honorable mention, of course, is skins as usual. Now, none of these skins should probably be in the bot lane, but I mean, like, Shaco's a jungler, so you might see him jungling your games. Warwick, you might see in your games a bit more because he's jungling. Zillion could be a support, so you might see some Zillion in your games, at least at first, of people that actually play Zillion that want to, like, use the skin. That might fall off a little later, though. But most of these champions aren't anything you'll see in the bottom lane outside of an occasional gank. So Shaco, Warwick, be on the lookout for those two when they're ganking. Ward the river, ward your tri-brush quite often. See those coming from a while away because like one has stealth and one has a superior running speed if you're low on health. So there you go. Now as for the AD carry tier list, with these changes in mind, in the comment section down below, decide which champions you think are A tier, B tier, S tier even, where you think Jinx sits, because it's a Jinx channel. Jinx most likely mains watching this video. Where you think Jinx sits among those. If I had to take my own shot though, for my own opinion, put my neck on the line so you guys can make fun of something, I will say I don't think the Zeri changes are gonna skyrocket her to S tier, but I think sometimes stats like those and those changes are a bit underrated by most people of how just survivability and ability to also like do a little bit extra damage. Like I mentioned last hitting all the time. Last hitting is going to be like slightly easier now. If Zeri's not been good at last hitting, well, you got a little extra damage to last hit better. So if you can't beat your lane opponent that way, you can get gold and just get items the other way. And also just a little bit extra survivability because of extra health and stuff like that. So I think if Zeri was like, say, C tier, I think these changes would move a Zeri into like a B tier. I think a lot of AD carries are considered bad because of all the tank item changes, like Sunfire getting to be its own item, Heartsteel, some people really have an opinion about that one. I still think AD carries are not doomed like people say they are, but I understand that how tanky people can be. As someone who's been spamming ARAM games, specifically so I can play as many tanks in different situations as possible, and then build that and like rush that item, all right? Like I won a Galio game because I just rushed tank Galio, and I had like 6,000 health at one point. I was like, I'm really unkillable. All right, cool. I got full honors by my team, and I was like, that might be a problem when I got full honors, all right? I'm not toxic, but I'm just saying I shouldn't get all of them. I just did my job. That's all I did was my job. I didn't do anything special. I wasn't like hyping the team up as like a hype man as we're going on. Like, yo, we got this. Go in, Shaco. I'm going to ult on top of you while you're stealth, and it's going to be great. I did that, sure, but my point is like, the item is what facilitated that happening. So I do get it a bit more now that I've had time to get my hands on it. But I still think playing against the item with AD carries is difficult on the Rift and in ARAM, but not impossible. I do think one of the things about the item to remember is the item by itself just gives health. And it does mean like it can be scaling health while then you build like a frozen heart. And so all the health you don't get in frozen heart, you're getting from this one now instead. But I just don't, maybe it's just because it's my job to be optimistic to you guys, but I don't see it being as doomy and glooming as people are saying. So with that being said, however, I do think DPS AD carries are superior in a meta like this, and a meta where people are getting extremely healthy and extremely tanky. So things like Jinx, Caitlyn, Tristana, Xayah, AD carries like those, their primary focus is to DPS. I think they're going to be the better AD carries going into this new meta, because even with all that health and stuff, as long as you get like a Last Whisper, make sure to get armor penetration, it's going to work very well. Vayne, however, I don't think, like if I said DPS AD carries are A tier, Vayne might be B tier. And hear me out. It's not the range. It's not because I have a hatred for Vayne. It's just because the way you counter true damage, which used to be like Vayne's thing, her and like Vel'Koz in terms of AP damage, was to build extra health. Like it's a percent damage based off of maximum health. When you have an item that's helping you get like 6,000 health, suddenly you're doing less. Now, granted, Vayne also builds crit and stuff, so I don't know if if it was like a B+ tier, or maybe like an A- tier, right? I wouldn't put Vayne super far down, but I do think with all the engage, because of all the tanks coming in her short range, even though she's building crit with the true damage, she's a little bit worse off, not than Kog'Maw. She's not Kog'Maw though. She's not Kog'Maw. She's not. She's Kog'Maw. Poor Kog'Maw. But anyways, yes, I think castrated carries though, like Varus, if you're on lethality build and stuff like that, they're gonna struggle more in a meta like this. Misfortune, for example, even with a crit build, there's just other AD carries that do the whole DPS thing but better. But I wouldn't call Misfortune bad if you do build the crit build specifically on her, because she does have like love tap, and if people are standing in the ultimate and it's critting the whole time, it can be good. Like Lucian, for example, he's a castrated carry, but he has a lot of DPS, and his ult can also scale off a crit. But I would still like, no one's Kog'Maw. Let's just get that out the way right now. Kog'Maw, he's the bottom of the barrel. Even those guys aren't Kog'Maw. But I will say, if you main those champions, you're probably gonna struggle a bit more. However, I do think that they did put out a post about Hearthstone and stuff, and they said they do actually feel it's pretty balanced, but they're still going to keep an eye on it in case things are still a little bit wonky. So if this patch, you struggle against those still, just keep in mind, Riot's keeping an eye on those, and we'll see how that goes. But in the comment section down below, you're going to have to make your own tier list and share it with each other, and maybe like, oh, I'm also Diamond. I'm Diamond too, and you can like talk about that, or you're Bronze and you're Bronze, and you guys can be like, oh, let's like, you know, swap ideas and why we think this is and help each other out, kind of a thing. That's how this works. That's going to be all from this video from me, because I can only say so much. Even if on my Smurf account, I'm whatever ranked, it doesn't matter. That's the point. This is your opinion, your time. So I don't know which video will be next, because I even have a lot of kinks. So until next time, take care. ggGetJinxed. Thank you for watching, and enjoy pizza responsibly.